Hi, my name is Nicole Faye Golden, and I'm the host of Scar Stories podcast. We all walk through seasons of brokenness, and it's so easy to buy into the lies that we're alone, forgotten, weak, and too far gone. But here's what I want you to know. We all have scars, and so we all have stories. I'm really hoping these interviews resonate with you and that you walk away knowing that you aren't alone, you're never forgotten, you are strong enough, and there are always second chances. Thanks so much for tuning in, and welcome to Scar Stories. Thank you guys so much for tuning into Scar Stories. My name is Nicole Golden, the host, and I have a very special new friend to me. I've been following their story for a while, but we got to meet for the first time just a few minutes ago, and I'm already blessed. This is Katherine Wolf.
Oh,
And
I'm blessed.
so I know enough from reading your books that you just walk around blessed. And so I can't wait to hear have you share your story. And I know you guys are just going to be captivated by her joy. But Katherine, thank you so much for joining us today. This is going to be so fun. And I'm sure a little bit teary too.
Well, it is such a blessing to be here, Nicole. And I can't believe this is the anniversary of your brother passing. It's a special day, and no doubt one that the Lord worked out for me to be here with you and encourage you in your journey.
Yes. Well, I know it's so sweet how God does that on tough days, like brings people into your path and like gives you things to kind of like look forward to, just to be like, hey, and we're already jumping in, but it's the juxtaposition between pain and joy. And I feel like that's your story in a nutshell. It's this juxtaposition between pain and joy. So for those who maybe aren't familiar with you and your ministry, Hope Heals, can you tell us your story in a nutshell?
Absolutely.
And give us a little bit about what happened. Was it 10 years ago now?
Yeah, it was 12 and a half, actually.
Okay.
It was 2008, April of 2008. And as a 26-year-old new mother with a 6-month-old baby in the next room and with no medical history, no family history, nothing, I got a bad headache, and turns out it was a massive brainstem stroke that was caused by a malformed collection of blood vessels in my brainstem. And I never knew I'd had it, but I was born with it and had this little malformed collection in my brain my entire life, called an AVM, arterial venous malformation. And it ruptured as a 26-year-old. And my baby in the next room was taking a nap, slept through the whole thing. My husband was able to call 911. He was home and saved my life.
And he was just home randomly, right? In your book, you said, I think he just came home on accident.
Right. He did. He came home to print a paper for his final class in law school, and he was home for under 45 minutes. And it happened to me when I fell, promptly was almost unconscious when 911 came. They rushed me into 16 hours of brain surgery, and I survived, which was uncertain for sure. They think that I bled out on the table 5 different times. So they could have considered me dead 5 times in surgery. And even going into surgery, they told Jay to expect I would not make it, that this was unsurvivable, that bleeding in your brain stem basically is a death sentence. And in addition to all of that, they discovered that there were multiple aneurysms on my brainstem, which is also completely fatal. And yet somehow I did not die. And Jay, my husband, tells the story that when they came out and told him that I had lived, that was hope enough. And they went on to say, she lived. However, there will be tremendous deficits. Sacrifices were made to save her life. And that has been so true, Nicole. I've had 12 surgeries since the stroke. I had to relearn to eat and speak and walk everything was taken away. I was taken
Mm.
down to zero. Um, but so powerfully and beautifully, I should tell you, if you've got a minute,
Tell us.
that I recently just woke up to the fact that in my deep wounding, my healing had come because
Wow.
the wise and careful surgeon knew exactly what he was doing. And I
Mm.
think it's very powerful to consider that in our own lives and stories,
Yeah.
that the careful surgeon wounded me greatly in order for my healing to come
Mm.
and to sustain my life. And
Mm.
it is a powerful thought in Job. Um, a passage from Job, maybe it's Job 12, says he wounds and he heals.
Mm.
And I really love this idea that in my deepest woundings, my healing could come. And I would
Mm.
spend 11 months and 5 days on the feeding tube, only eating through a peg in my stomach. And it was as horrible as you can imagine.
Well, I remember you saying, like, watching cooking shows and, like, craving foods, like, and
Oh,
I'm such a
oh,
foodie, so I'm dying for you. I'm like, that had to have been the worst.
oh, it was unbelievable, Nicole. The pain on every level associated with not eating, because of course, not eating is so much more than just about not
Yes.
consuming food.
It's
Not
comfort.
eating is life and
Yeah.
family and being with friends, and you grab a coffee. It's just your
Yeah.
life is revolves around socializing through food,
Yeah.
honestly. And that was all taken away. I could
Mm.
have nothing. They wouldn't even let me have ice chips, nothing, water, nothing. So it
Yeah.
was it was horrific. And then, of course, I'm in a wheelchair full time at that point. So for 18 months, I'm solely in the chair, unable to even stand up. So
And
it
with
was
a brand new baby. I mean, the way you talk
oh,
about, like,
it's
your first Mother's
unimaginable.
Day, everything else, just, I mean, and I think what was so intriguing to me was you said you were completely there in your mind. You
Right.
just could not communicate. How long was it before you could actually start communicating, specifically with your husband first? Because I would think you would be able to speak with him first, probably him. How how long was
Right.
that?
So exactly. So I had no voice at all to make sounds for many months, but I began communicating with my hands, my eyes, with movements fairly quickly. And
Okay.
they got me this almost like this weird robot board when I was in the hospital,
Oh, yeah.
where I would hit letters and spell words to my family. So I would basically type frantically with my one working hand. My right hand doesn't work after the surgery, so I just use my left. But I would crank out words, and my famous expression that I would say over and over through this robot was, I'm the same on the inside.
Mm,
I'm the same on
mm,
the inside, because
mm.
I so desperately wanted my family to know I can't even talk. I cannot walk. I cannot eat. I cannot, my face is half paralyzed. And at that point, one of my eyes went out the other direction because I had to have surgery to move it back in. But everything looked like Katherine wasn't there anymore. I
Yeah.
couldn't even speak to them. So I needed them to know, no, I am fully tracking. I
Yeah.
remember phone numbers from a third grade phone call with my best friend. Everything's intact. It's just you're not hearing anything, which
Yeah.
was both what most painful, obviously for many reasons, but also so hopeful, because now I know, being in the world of brain injury, the amount of people whose cognition is
Mm,
gone or
mm,
deeply impaired after stuff like this is
mm.
they have no memories, they have no personality traits that they had before, their faith is not intact. It's a tragedy
Mm.
what brain injury can do to the frontal lobe particularly.
Yeah, yeah. It was, as I was reading both the books, my husband's mom, my mother-in-law, who's one of my best friends, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 10 years ago. And she
Mm,
passed 2 years ago, the day after my last son was born. And as I'm
wow.
reading, it's almost like we were talking about, it's almost like you're trapped within your own body with
Oh,
Alzheimer's. And I
yeah.
almost like, I can't imagine you were trapped within your own body as well. And just that feeling of discouragement of like, did you question whether they were going to believe you were the same person? Or did you know like they're connecting with that? When I'm telling them I'm the same on the inside, they're connecting with that.
Some of both for sure. I wondered, can they even believe me? Like,
Yeah.
is it possible to not be able to communicate? But it's so funny to remember, Nicole. I can remember Jay and I, what was it? There were several like inside jokes that
Okay.
involved like a funny like hand gesture. Like, we loved the show 30 Rock back in the day.
Yeah.
And there was this hilarious part of 30 Rock where this character says about another character, like, almost, with like a finger raised in the air like that, like,
Yeah.
almost. And I remember we were talking about something talking,
Yeah.
and I did that sign. And I could see in his eyes him tracking, like, oh, if she can be doing like an inside joke, she
Yeah.
has memory, she's tracking. So I think that came pretty quickly, is that I hadn't lost my sense of humor. I hadn't lost really any of the things that made my personality my own. And above all, obviously, was and honestly, I believe the reason that my recovery and outlook on life have been so steadfast is because from those first moments, I had poured the words of God into my
Mm,
heart from an early age.
mm,
So they were swimming around
mm,
inside of me.
mm,
I'm recognizing I'm hard pressed but not crushed.
mm.
I'm living out. I can never be alone. He is with me. Greater is he who is in me than he in the world. And I'm marinating in my own head and heart with the deep truths of a life spent with Jesus for the
Yeah.
first 26 years, as long as I can remember. Um, and that in my mind was the game changer. That,
Yeah.
I was filled with hope even through tremendous darkness and obstacles. And I can I can remember pivotal moments of having conversations without really being able to talk with my husband's father, who's a pastor.
Yes.
And I can remember mouthing, like, why did this happen? Why
Mm,
did this happen? Why did this happen? And I can remember him saying, because this world is messed up and horrible things happen.
yeah.
And had that been the statement, and I'd been on zero with my faith,
Mm,
that could have really rubbed me wrong. But
mm,
instead, I know deeply that somehow all things are
mm,
working for the good of those who love him. And
mhm,
I'm tracking that God is in this story. This is not the end of my story.
mm.
So there was almost this really cool factor of my faith being such a part of who I was on the inside that I couldn't pretend it wasn't real, even in the darkest moments.
Yeah. And I think that's something, every story is so different. And so many people that I interview, they have these deep pains that they walk through. And when I start to share my story, I always want to say, like, I'm not comparing pain. It's just one of the things Jenny Lesko and I talked about in the podcast I did with her was we all have a different pain reference. Like our only reference is the greatest pain we've had to walk through. And so I know, like, 2
Right.
years ago in 2019, when my brother committed suicide and my mother-in-law died all within the same year.
Mm,
I remember I had questioned up until that point, like, what would I do if I had to walk through losing people? What
right.
would I do if I had to walk through a major trauma? Like, would I be okay? And
Right.
I do know just what you're saying, like the work comes before the work of, getting to know who Jesus Christ is and understanding. I love what you said, like what your father in law said. We are in a broken world. And I think people forget that in Genesis 3, everything broke. We broke physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything broke.
Yes.
And God is in the process of redeeming that. But this side of heaven, things will always be broken. And so the
Right.
best we do is just take our brokenness. And I wrote about this when I was writing about kind of remembering my brother today. That brokenness, when something breaks, it gets a hard edge. And so we walk around with these edges, but one of my friends was like, you know what, those edges, yes, like it gives you a different perspective, but it also kind of gives you almost like a leg up. Like it's almost like, okay, Jesus has been with me through this. So like Paul
Yeah.
says, so like I'm more than a conqueror. I can face anything now.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
me through, there had to have been, and you talk about it, those moments where it was almost like, why didn't I just die? This is
Right.
this
Oh,
is
for
like
sure.
years of you having to go through rehab and surgery, and in your honest moments, you're like, Jay could have just remarried, my kids could have, and I'm like heartbroken thinking about that, because you are such a beacon of light. But in those moments, what was that wrestling between, okay, I know what God's word says, but you said at one point, I loved it, God, you hurt my feelings, this isn't
Right.
fair. Talk to us about that wrestling.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there were a million moments of that, and a specific instance in November in 2008 where I can remember thinking the thoughts like, God, you made a mistake
Mm,
here. I should have died. I can remember seeing Jay playing with James across this big room we were in, and I'm in the wheelchair. And I looked up and I can remember thinking they would be better off if I
mm,
were gone. I should not be in this picture. And honestly, I don't fit in this world anymore. I'm in a wheelchair. I can't even eat food. I don't belong here. I can't take care of my children, child at the time, now children. Um, life is not going to work here. I can't just go back to this and have this be the new normal.
yeah.
And even as I was there, like I don't think life is worth living. I mean, I don't fully know what it feels like to be suicidal, but that was definitely the closest I'd ever come to thinking like this would be easier if I was no longer here.
Mm,
And I I can't I can't think this is what God made me for. This is
yeah.
what God had for my life. There was a sense suddenly of like, oh my gosh, wait, like, is God even real?
Mm,
Like this
yeah.
awesome, bizarre, scary, magic lie that I've been fed my whole life. Like, look where I am.
Because, like you said, you had
And
done everything right. Like, you had been
oh,
the good Christian
100%.
girl, you'd done everything, so, like, this doesn't happen to people who do everything right, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, like to a T, like a perfectionist times 1,000, like the overachiever for Jesus, the good soldier right here. So this is where my life ends up. I thank you, God.
Yeah.
And in all of that moment of just anger and sadness, confusion, bitterness, I wanted, in a way, for it all to be a lie. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm,
Like I
mm,
wanted
mhm.
to believe this is a joke, this is a mistake, God isn't even real. Like I wanted that to be the story.
'Cause that would have been
But
easier to grapple with.
right, it would have been easier to process. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could have just stayed angry and given a big, excuse me, but a big middle finger to the world.
No, do it, man. Yes. Yeah.
but but instead, even deeper than all of those emotions was this overwhelming sense, even in that moment, that I know too deeply that God is at work in
Mm,
this story,
mm,
and that what God is doing, even in this moment of terrible pain,
mm,
is so much bigger than just about me and
mm,
about this moment.
mhm.
And it was like, I mean, it's crazy. It's like I did not hear audible words from God, but there was an awakening
Yes.
to the scripture I had known since I was a child,
Mm,
that God had called me to this life. And I can remember actually even like seeing the wheelchair and knowing like, wait, like I don't think this is bad. I
Mm,
think this is different,
mm.
and that God called me to something different. And it kind of became this just game-changing moment
Yeah, that is
of,
powerful, Catherine.
yeah, of just suddenly recognizing that this is very special,
Mm,
and that God has a special assignment for me on earth.
mm.
And this is not something that everyone will live out. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, everyone doesn't have this. Everybody's got something, absolutely.
yeah.
But this brokenness right here is something that God is calling me to steward for my life.
Mm,
And I can't deny that in the darkness. I say a lot that what's true in the light is true in the dark. And
yes.
so I couldn't deny that God, even in this horrible situation, was so at work
Mm,
that I just needed to wait and
yeah.
see what he was doing. And honestly, I did. And it took a while, but the fruit has been
Mm,
as absolutely incredible as, I mean, no one could have ever dreamed. No one,
yeah.
sorry, I keep crying.
I
No one,
please do not apologize. This is such a
I know,
tender, vulnerable thing to be speaking about. And like what you said is like just in that moment, you just felt this deepness. And I think that's that grace that Paul talked about in Second Corinthians 12 when we ask God to take away our thorns, and God's like, I'm not going to, because my grace
right,
is going to be sufficient. And I feel like
right.
that's what you experienced in that moment. And that's
Absolutely.
such
I
a
love that
tender thing.
passage. I
Yeah.
love that we boast all the more
Yes.
because of our weakness, because it's
Yes.
Christ in us. And that is the story. And what has been so beautiful to see is post coming out of nearly 2 years of rehab and having had endless surgeries and appointments and so many problems. And I'm still so incredibly disabled today. I can't drive a car, I can't walk on my own. I have a hand that doesn't work. My face is paralyzed on one side, and on and on and on. I'm deaf in one ear, I'm blind in one eye. Um, that in spite of all that, God has so powerfully used me. My husband and I have a camp for families from all over the country with disabilities who get to come, and we love on them. And
Mm,
we've gone on to write several books about our story and our hope in Jesus. And we've just gotten to minister and care for people in an entirely different way than we ever would have had this
yeah.
not happened.
Yeah.
So we're seeing the beauty of the redemption.
Oh, and it is powerful. And I will say, I have both of your books here, Hope Heals and Suffer Strong. And I read them both back to back so quickly. Both yours and Jay's honesty, vulnerability. I mean, I laughed, I cried. It was so good for my soul. And in fact, my mom was just down here last week and I gave her Suffer Strong because, they're walking through the loss of a son. And I said, this is one of those books on grief and trauma that it's not going to bog you down. You're going to sense the hope all the way through it. It was just so
Yeah.
powerful. And I just
Yeah.
want to thank you so much for sharing
Oh,
that.
thank you for saying that. Thank
Yeah.
you for saying that, Nicole. It's such a gift to be able to encourage someone with a little nugget, a
Yeah.
tangible nugget.
Yeah. Well, and
When you write your book, it'll be the same, and I can't wait to read it.
oh, you're so sweet. I'm excited. But one of the things that you had said that I just want to go back to real quickly is like what's true in the light is true in the darkness. And I
Yes,
keep bringing this in a lot of my podcasts because this was so life changing when I was talking with Jenny Lesko and she was sharing her story of losing Lenya and
yes,
Lenya going to heaven. She talked about how, and I think she writes this in her book too, like you feel like you're in the darkness, but really you're under the wings of God, like the Psalm 91 passage. I thought
mm,
that is so powerful. And I feel like that was your life. Yes, you were in this darkness, but Jesus just covered both you and Jay. And he
right.
did that tangibly through community. And I want to talk about this for a minute because you talk so much about community in both of your books.
Yeah, yeah,
And the first question I have for you is, you were I love how Jay, it's just such a sweet love story the two of you have, but he talks about like you were a sassy woman and very independent. I love that because I know my husband would probably agree that I have some sass, but very independent woman. What was it like for you to realize you can do very little for yourself now? And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
honest, like surrender. I mean, first of all, you didn't have a choice, because you're
Right.
point
Yes.
in this place where you don't really have a choice.
Yes.
But allowing your heart to surrender to that and accept that as this is, as the psalmist says, this is the lot God has given me, and
Right.
not fight against that. What was that journey like for you?
It's been extremely difficult. It still is, but there is such a freedom, just a
Mm,
joy in kind of letting go.
yeah.
I know I can't control that. I know I'm never going to drive a car again, short of a miracle. So can I just pivot? Can
Mm,
I pivot the way I used to do things? Can I live differently? And Nicole, I think in all of our stories and all of our pain, if we could learn to pivot, it would be a different deal.
talk to us
We
about
could
that.
say, I thought it was this way, but it's
Yeah.
this way. I thought it was gonna look like this, but it looks like that.
Mm,
And if we can say, you know what? Okay, so I'm going to expect less of this world
mm,
and more of God. Let God overwhelm our expectations. I think we'd live very differently because we'd stop trying to get back to
mm,
the other way. Like, this is my new deal. This is the
yeah.
new thing God is doing in my story. And
Yeah.
I would not have chosen it. It will be a thorn in my flesh for life.
Mm,
And yet, you know what? I'm I'm gonna grow here.
mm,
I'm not gonna
mm.
wait till I'm back where I was. Things grow here.
Yeah.
And do you know who Jess Conley is?
Yes, I do.
She is a wonderful friend of mine in Charleston, just a brilliant writer and speaker. And she talks about this a lot, and it's really moved me that in the very deepest, darkest pain in all of our lives, God is saying, things grow here,
Mm,
exactly where you are. Don't wait to get back to it. Things grow here
mm.
right now. And it's been very striking for me. What's in your hand today that
Yeah.
you couldn't do when you were in a different situation, you
Yeah.
know?
And I think we miss out on those powerful, intimate moments with Jesus when we are fighting against, no, I just want to get back to where it was. And Jesus is like, no, I want to meet you here in this moment,
Right.
and
Yes,
we miss
yes.
that. And you talk about in your books too about just even in this pivoting, how close heaven has become for you, how God's kind of removed the veil. And it's almost like we're on our tiptoes looking into eternity of you're right. This isn't supposed to be like this. There is more. And I'm going to lean into that more of eternity in heaven. It's so powerful.
100% yes. I mean, wait and wait well in the meantime,
Mhm.
like live with that eternal perspective.
Yeah.
But don't just live for heaven, live well on earth
Mm,
because of heaven. I
yeah.
love the idea that Second Corinthians 4, that we're wasting away, but inwardly we're being renewed day after day, because our light and momentary trials are achieving for us the glory that cannot be revealed. Therefore, we live for what is unseen,
Mm,
but I think we are called to live this life really well in whatever state we're in, whatever's happened to us, is to really, because of that eternal perspective,
yeah.
don't waste this. This is
Yeah.
something very special God is doing.
Yeah. And you talk in your book, it's so powerful about soul healing. I can't remember because you and Jay go back and forth, which I love.
Yeah,
I think it was Jay who told the story about after a conference, a lady came up and put her hands on you and wanted to pray that you would be healed
right.
and
Yes,
healed
yes,
physically. And Jay was like, she missed the whole point because you had shared how your soul had been healed. And
yes.
I loved that thought because I tell people so much. So I have 3 mental illnesses, anxiety, depression, and borderline personality disorder. And I kind of came to that moment. I kind of had a similar, moment where God didn't speak to me audibly, but just kind of told me at one point, like, I'm not going to take these from you. This is going to be
Yeah,
the rest of your life. You're not going to be
yeah.
healed, but you are going to live healthy. And then you're going to use your story begin to break down the stigma and to point people to me in the midst of this.
Yes, yes,
And so
that's
it's funny
amazing.
because, I'll go to concerts, I'll go to different places, and people like to say, like, in this moment, Jesus is going to free us from our anxiety and free us from our depression, and we're going to be healed. And I get the heart behind it, but I'm also like, that's so dangerous to tell people,
Right,
this side of heaven, God's going to, because then it becomes, well, why did he heal that person and not me? Why is that
right.
person okay and I'm not?
Totally.
And so I think what's so interesting though is the soul healing. And you spoke about this right in the
Right.
beginning too, like he wounds to heal. Talk to us about the soul healing.
Absolutely. So there's such a freedom in recognizing like healing is coming.
Mm.
It just may not be on earth.
Oh, come on.
But even right now, the soul is healed. The feelings that were hurt are no longer hurt. There is peace in this story.
Mm,
And the ultimate healing that needed to happen this side of heaven is the healing of the soul.
mm,
Is
mm,
there's no more anger and resentment. Instead, there's just joy at what remains. And that's
mm.
where we all must live.
Yeah, that's so powerful. But it was a fight to get there. And I think it's important for
For
people to
sure.
know.
Oh,
Would you say, is it okay for people to question? Is it okay for people to say, God, you hurt my feelings? Is it okay to wrestle through the anger and bitterness? I think
of
sometimes people need
course.
to hear that that's okay, because then we put so much pressure on ourselves of like, no, if I was, close to Jesus, I wouldn't even question.
100%. I don't think that at all is true. I think being close to Jesus means you're real concerned with, wait, my life just blew up. I thought things are gonna be smooth sailing in my story. Or you kind of can't help but buy into a narrative of if I do the right thing, then I get good things.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
something. And of course there's confusion and anger and sadness, and that is so healthy. And God calls us to lament,
Mm,
to cry out, to feel everything, to not suppress emotions in
mm,
our story.
yeah.
But he also calls us not to elevate them and let them be the lead story.
Wow.
God
Yes.
calls us to, yeah, it's to hold that tension of don't suppress but don't elevate.
Mm,
Feel everything, but then cry out to God. Let
mm,
it turn you to him, not away from him. Put the
yeah.
emotions in the proper place.
Yeah, yeah, that is so powerful. Okay, so basically one or two more questions for you, because I was just sitting here thinking, God just brought this to my mind. How did
Yeah.
you and Jay continue to keep your marriage strong? Because I think, like, I had read, did you guys mention this, that the divorce rates are so strong,
Oh,
high
absolutely. I
when
don't know
someone
if we did or not, probably because they are. I mean, it's really unbelievable. Even when we were in the hospital, a social worker told Jay 90% of marriages of under 30-year-olds don't make it from this kind of stuff. And he's like, okay, cool,
Yeah,
good
he's
to
like, thank you.
know. Yeah, that the stress is just so significant that couples cannot navigate it. And yeah, I don't totally know how we did, but I do know that, I mean, there was a lot of prayer, first of all, and a lot of choosing to be on the same side of things, which
Mm,
is so important in a marriage,
mm,
that it would be easy to fight
yeah,
at each other
yeah,
about stuff that's not between us. We're going to fight the stroke and the aftermath together on the same side. And
mm,
I think that is such a key in marriage, is
mm,
to be on the same side. I also think in terms of a marriage, it is so important to recognize that whoever your spouse is the one you are supposed to be with.
yes, that's such
That
a powerful truth. Yeah.
that God put you together, and he or she may not feel like your soulmate right this minute, but
Mhm,
that actually doesn't exist. There's no
mhm.
such thing as a soulmate. And you always marry a stranger because you don't know everything about them.
Yeah.
So making peace with the stranger in your life, in your bed, is the key, I think, in
Like, Catherine,
marriage.
you are
It's
blowing up every rom-com ever for us. I mean, come on now.
Isn't
But
that
no,
the
you're
truth?
right.
But
You're 100% right, 'cause I think
rom-coms have ruined us. I think
they
you're right. Rom-coms have ruined the world.
they have, because, I think we forget, for those of you that are listening that are Jesus followers, like, the purpose of marriage is to be a picture of the gospel. And it's loving someone when they're most unlovable. And it's
Right.
offering that forgiveness and that grace consistently. And it's being Jesus Christ to each other. It's mutual submission. And I think, like, it's real easy to have a great marriage when things are going really well,
Right.
when
Yes.
things go hard, when we have to, I love what Matt Chandler says, gospel ourselves, and
Right.
remind us, like, this is to be a picture of the gospel. And for me, I know, especially when I was at my worst, my husband loving me through the midst of that was probably the greatest picture of the gospel. And I think, honestly, the first time I truly understood what God's love, grace, and forgiveness looked like, because he was practically doing it for me and at my worst.
Right. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I could not agree more. And it's not always real fun.
No.
Yeah. But there is something so sacred about choosing each other,
Mm,
even if you think in the moment this is not what it's supposed to be like.
mm,
Because the reality is, our lives are nothing like what they were supposed to be
mm,
like.
mm.
There is messed up stuff this side of heaven,
Yeah.
but can we hang in there with the one that we've chosen?
Yeah. I love that. And then Jesus blessed you with another son.
Yes,
That,
it's shocking. We still can't believe it 5 years later that John is 5 years old now. That's 7.5 years after the stroke. I did have another baby. Biologically, I should say. Everyone thinks he must be adopted. No, I
no.
had him.
Yeah,
I
you went
had
through the
him.
work, girl. Come on.
Yeah, seriously. And he is just this miracle. It's this crazy
Wow.
picture. I see John coming down the stairs of my house, and I'm like, this is a picture of the gospel. This is
Mm,
broken things made new things. This
mm,
is near death and new life. And this is just this incredible picture of everything I believe. So
I love it.
it's pretty crazy. I should tell you John's middle name
Yes, I was
is
hoping you
for
would do this. Yes.
yeah, John's middle name Nestor is for my neurosurgeon Nestor Gonzalez, who has spent his life giving second chances to patients just
Yeah.
like me. And John Nestor Wolf is named that for a reason. Actually, we did not know this at the time, but the name Nestor in Hebrew means seeker of miracles. So we
Wow.
just think it's just incredible that his very name is the seeker of miracles.
I love that. I love it. And I
Thank
think
you.
what's so powerful is, they contemplated, I remember, you guys sharing this in your book, whether or not to even take you into surgery
Right, they
because of
did.
how bad everything was when you first had the stroke. But because Dr. Gonzalez saw that you had a 6-month-old, that was really kind of what made him decide, no, we're going to try to save her life.
You're exactly right. They were initially not going to operate on me. In fact, every doctor prior to Nestor seeing me in the emergency room was not going to touch me because they knew my husband was in law school. The liability could be
Mm,
tremendous. They knew there was almost no chance of survival. So we should just let her die
mm,
in the emergency room. And for some reason, Gonzalez came out, met my husband who was holding my 6-month-old baby, and said, and I know this was the Holy Spirit imparting into his heart, like, I need to try. I
wow.
need to give this a shot. So he tells a story that he went in very much like, I'm gonna try, but it's probably a lost cause. She's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
So it's really a miracle.
Well, and this is why we tell our stories, right? Because when you stand on this side and you look back, I mean, I'm just getting goosebumps as you share your story. It's like your husband was home for 45 minutes. Your son was taking a nap when you had,
Right.
the stroke. And then,
Yes.
Dr. Gonzalez just happened to be there and decide he was going to give it a shot. And then, like,
Yes.
you guys are going to have to read the book Hope Heals first just to hear the story. But then throughout, like, there's just all these little times, these little God winks, like you said, that God just kind of like takes care of you. And I think too, and this will be the last question, and I promise. Like my husband's
Oh, sure.
always talks about landing the plane and never does. So this is me like trying to land the plane, but I love you, Katherine. I can't leave
Oh,
you.
I love it. I
Um,
love it. Oh gosh, please. I love
um,
it.
so, oh, now I just lost my train of thought. Dang it. I got too excited about like this whole thing and I just lost my train of thought. But okay.
It doesn't matter at all.
Here's what it is. Here's what it is. I got it back.
Yes.
Thank you, Lord. So, when I was walking through the traumatic, year of 2019, I knew God was there, but I don't know that in the moment I could have processed it because you're processing so much when you're walking through trauma. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But now that I
Yes.
look back, I'm like, I saw it's so funny because I knew that fall. Somehow I knew my brother was going to end up committing suicide. Jesus was getting me ready that fall. I just had
Yeah.
this sense of like, I had several friends whose brothers had overdosed or who had, passed away. And I just kind of had this feeling like you're next, And so I just remember I started working through stuff and counseling and stuff. But I saw that now looking back. Like looking back, I kind of saw how Jesus was preparing things, getting ready for things. And even with my mother-in-law's passing, like I had preeclampsia. So they had to take my son 3 weeks early. If he hadn't have come 3 weeks early, he would not have been born. She would have not. She saw his picture right before she went to heaven. I mean, literally,
Oh, wow.
my mother-in-law Case, she opened her eyes for 1 second, saw Case, and then instantly was in heaven. And
Oh my gosh.
that not wild? So I look back and I can see all those God winks now. In the moment, you can't see them. Is that true for your journey or was your journey different? Like in the moment, could you see the God winks or is it more now as you look back?
Totally looking back.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. Because when you're in horrible pain, that's what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
There's no way when whatever your pain is, that's not what hurts on your
Yeah.
body,
Yeah.
physical or emotional. So that's what you're thinking about. Later, when years have passed on many occasions, you can start to make sense of what happened and see, oh my word, God was there every step of my journey. He
Mm.
never left. He never abandoned. He he did so much. All those God winks, mark them down, take stock. This is incredible. But of course, in the moment, you can't see
No,
those.
no.
No, it's years later. We say, like, in the moment, let's give each other the gift of presence and the
Yes.
ministry of tears
Yes.
and not try to make sense of it all yet. There's a time for that. But for now, the time is to cry and to
Yes.
heal and to get through it,
Yes. Yes. Well, and that's why I love to. Did you talk about that at the end of Hope Heals or Suffer Strong? Like how to walk with someone who's walking through trauma. I can't remember.
Suffer strong
Okay.
for sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah, for
So even
sure.
if you're listening, you haven't walked through a major trauma, these books are so good because, Katherine and Jay kind of explain even, what's okay and what's not okay to say and do when someone's in the midst of that. And I love that you said, Katherine, like just give when someone's in the midst of the trauma, don't try to explain it away or explain God to them. Just let them be in the midst of that pain. God will meet them,
Right.
and then
Totally. Yes.
and that's why I even wanted to start this podcast because we have so many people listening that are in the middle of some deep, dark stuff and they can't see
Right.
the God winks yet. And
Right.
so, like, I want to be able to have people share their stories to say, you will be able to see it. Trust us. Like, let us be, that story in the Old Testament where Moses is called to hold his arms up during the battle and they get tired. And so Aaron and all the, leaders are helping him hold their arms up. And so I'm hoping this podcast is let us help hold your arms up till you can
Right.
get to the other side and you can see the God winks,
Totally.
So
yes, absolutely. That's it. That's what we are called to do for each other.
I love it. All
I
right.
love that you're doing it, Nicole.
Oh, thank you, Katherine. Well, just tell us, and this is what we'll sign off on, but tell us why your ministry is called Hope Heals.
Well, because of course, hope heals the soul. That's what's the most broken place in all of our stories is our heart. And the hope of Jesus heals the deeply broken soul, the broken heart.
I love it. I love it. Katherine, thank you so much. Make sure you guys, I've got both books here, but they're always going to come up backwards on here, but Suffer Strong, Hope Heals, phenomenal. Check out their ministry. You said the disabled, I'm probably saying this so wrong, so help me. Disabled community,
No,
the number one
yeah,
minority
you're
in the world.
exactly right. Yeah, people living with disabilities are the largest minority group in the world. Yeah.
That is, I read that and I was mind blowing because no one talks about that. Nobody.
No, of course not. And it's a vicious cycle as nothing's accessible. So you don't see anybody in the world with disabilities. So you don't think they're there. So
Yeah.
nothing's accessible. Nothing's made accessibly. So you never see them. And it's a vicious cycle.
Well, you guys make sure you check out their ministry, these books. Catherine, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your story and your time with us. And
Oh gosh, Nicole, what a blessing.
oh, you're so sweet. Well, everyone too, make sure you check out NicoleGolden.org for more resources. I have some of Catherine's stuff linked there as well. But thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to Scar Stories podcast. We all need places where we can feel seen, be safe, find connection and resources. I would love to connect with you on social media at Nicole Faye Golden. I also have a website with a ton of resources and a free 7-day Praying Scared prayer journal at NicoleGolden.org. Thank you for tuning in. I'd love it if you shared this with your friends and if you left a rating and a comment. And I look forward to seeing you next time as we delve into mental health, parenting, family, and so many other issues with a lot of my friends. We'll see you soon.